This is a CNN special report. America's New War. Tonight, the first bird's eye view of the devastation. Wall Street vows to get back to business. The nation honors the victims.
So when you get back to your mom and dad this morning, I want you to give them a big old hug and hold on to them and tell them you love them. And I bet they're going to do the same thing for you.
And President Bush takes aim.
Our nation was horrified, but it's not going to be terrorized. We're a nation that can't be cowed by evildoers.
The Vice President reveals what the U.S. was ready to do to stop a fourth hijack attack.
You've got an airplane full of American citizens, civilians, captured by hostages, captured by terrorists, headed, and are you going to, in fact, shoot it down, obviously, and kill all those Americans on board?
Also tonight, victims of Tuesday's inferno.
And it's this big ball of fire just engulfed me. I just froze. I didn't do anything. I just stood there.
How New York has captured newfound admiration from many Americans. And in depth on the suspected terrorist mastermind, Osama bin Laden. This is a CNN special report, America's New War. From New York, here's Aaron Brown.
Good evening again. In less than 12 hours, they will ring the opening bell on Wall Street, about a block and a half from where the World Trade Center once stood. It's supposed to happen as it does most every weekday at 9:30 Eastern Time. A lot of people will be holding their breath. It's not going to be any other morning. That sound of the bell will, to all who hear it, serve notice that this city, New York, and this country is moving forward after the unfathomable horror of Tuesday morning. And we saw that horror more clearly today, personally, than we have at any point in our coverage from the inside of a Coast Guard helicopter flying overhead. And we'll be showing you some of those pictures coming up. New Yorkers have been working relentlessly to try and get the lower part of the city ready for business tomorrow. Workers continue the grim task of rescue and recovery, removing the debris and the rubble from ground zero. They still call it a rescue operation, though no one has been rescued since Wednesday, and the toll tonight of the missing stands at nearly 5,000. It is, of course, Sunday, and while the rescue workers did not take a break, millions of other New Yorkers and Americans filled churches trying to make some sense of the senselessness of it all. As the nation reflected on the crisis, the president once again lashed out at the terrorists who brought us to this moment. And the vice president, for the first time since the crisis began, broke his silence, warning Afghanistan that it faces, quote, the full wrath of the United States of America if it does not turn over the alleged terrorist here, Osama bin Laden. The biggest investigation in American history is underway and expanding tonight. Sources say 2 new arrest warrants were issued for what are still being called material witnesses. We have, as many of you know, been covering this since the early hours of Tuesday morning, since about 9:30 Tuesday, when we first looked out behind us on this balcony at what was the World Trade Center. We have seen, as millions of you have, the destruction and the rubble. We saw it differently today. Early this morning, we boarded a Coast Guard helicopter just off the southern tip of Manhattan Island. It was on a cutter there. We came out there from Staten Island. It flew overhead. Rather than come back hours later and polish our thoughts and our words, we thought we would show you the pictures as we shot them and just replay the words we spoke minutes after touching down. When you get in the air, it unfolds in front of you. We thought, to be perfectly honest, we would be shocked by what we saw, and we can only assume that we've seen so much since Tuesday, we are temporarily shocked out. In fact, as we came around the southern tip of the island and started to move in closer, it was almost a sense of awe. Awe at the audaciousness of the plan, awe at the evil brilliance of the plan, awe at the power that those 2 jet bombs, fully loaded wide-body jets, they're powered to destroy. It turns out, as sometimes is the case, the cliches in many cases are true. As you come around the island, we're moving now to the west, around the southern tip of Manhattan Island. The Trade Center towers would have been just in front as we zoom past that building. Just in front of there, tower number 1 would have been right there, right where you're looking in between those 2 buildings. Now we're farther to the west looking back. You see the smoke. To us at least, it is a much wider area of damage than we thought it was from our location from where we've been broadcasting. There's a huge hole in the middle. And I'll venture a guess here, and it's only that as one of the 2 towers came tumbling down, it crashed on top of what I believe was building number 5 of the World Trade Center complex. As we say, the cliches turn out in many ways to be true. It does look like Mount St. Helens in an urban setting erupted. Oddly enough, it could have been a kind of modern Germany at the end of World War II, after the Allies moved in, bombing Germany. But it is in this relatively tight 8 or 10 block area. It's not vast across the city. It's just focused on this small area. It is also somewhat sickening when you look down and you see the dirt and the steel and the concrete, the water pouring on it all, and you realize as we stand here on this beautiful September Sunday morning in New York, there are 5,000 people still buried. There probably are a lot of adjectives I could throw out at you now. I looked down on that. It was sickening. It was sad. It was horrifying. The pictures pretty much tell that story, though, don't they? Last night at this time, we tried to give you a sense of the New York skyline before and after. Those were they weren't ground level shots, but they certainly were shots that didn't allow us to get over the area. So we want to try again here to show you what was and what is we can roll the tape, and I'll just chat over it as we go. Statue of Liberty just off the harbor. As you wing your way towards the World Trade Center, you see the towers in the upper left. That's what was. Down on the right, that's what is. The beautiful Manhattan skyline, as it might have looked at 8:45 on Tuesday morning, and as it absolutely looked today down in the lower right. It's something to see. It takes your breath away. It does. One quick note on this as well. I just want to take a moment to thank the Coast Guard for their efforts in helping us take a look at that today. The Coast Guard was among the first on the scene when the planes hit. They were very much involved. Their cutters were very much involved in helping the evacuation of people from lower Manhattan. They are now responsible, as they always are in New York, of keeping security in the Port of New York. It's obviously quite different now. And this was an especially difficult day for that Coast Guard unit on Staten Island that was working with us. They learned that another of their group is missing. That's the command center that controls the port. It's not unlike an air traffic control center. Anyway, the admiral we talked to today, who's also the chief of port of New York Harbor, had just left advising his men and women that another of their comrades was missing in the rubble. Our thanks to them. Now on to the investigation, which is the largest investigation in American history. 2 new warrants have been issued. Again, they are talking about these people not as suspects necessarily, but as material witnesses. That is just one part of the story that is unfolding. CNN national correspondent Eileen O'Connor is part of the team at CNN that is working on the investigative side, and Eileen joins us tonight from Washington. Good evening again.
Good evening, Aaron. Well, FBI agents, Aaron, are telling me they're just exhausted, but they are moving forward with one of the biggest manhunts, as you said, ever conducted here. What is thwarting their investigation are names that are related, similar, or aliases, stolen names. 2 new sealed arrest warrants have been issued for 2 people. They're wanted as material witnesses, sources say. Now, in addition, 2 other men already in custody under material witness warrants are not cooperating, according to investigators. But 2 others being held on INS violations, visa violations, are. Why? Well, they were found, sources say, with incriminating evidence. On Wednesday, authorities stopped an Amtrak train from St. Louis to San Antonio and took into custody 2 men, Mohammed Jaweed Asmath and Ayub Ali Khan, on INS violations. Sources say the 2 had been booked on a flight from Newark to San Antonio on Tuesday. It had been diverted to St. Louis. Law enforcement sources say the men also possessed a chilling item: box cutters. Barbara Olson, wife of the Solicitor General, told her husband on a cell phone call from American Airlines Flight 77 that crashed into the Pentagon that the men who hijacked her plane used box cutters.
She told me that she had been herded to the back of the plane. She mentioned that they had used knives and box cutters to hijack the plane. She mentioned that the pilot had announced that the plane had been hijacked. I believe she said that. I had to tell her about the 2 airplanes that had hit the World Trade Center.
Law enforcement sources are looking into the possibility that Asmath and Al Khan were headed for this house in San Antonio, owned by a man with a similar last name to 2 of the hijackers. He's now in custody on potential INS violations. They are also looking into this residence in Jersey City, New Jersey. Both Al Khan and Asmath lived here. The FBI searched the home, and sources say are finding the information helpful. They are also looking into the possibilities that other people connected to the hijackers used this address at one time or another. The home in Jersey City is close to the mosque where Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman used to preach before he went to prison for his role in inspiring the first attack against the World Trade Center in 1993. The official watch list includes more than 100 people. The FBI is so determined, they have actually distributed the list, Aaron, to rental car places, hotels, and of course airlines. They're reaching out to people in the public to try to apprehend these people. Now, there's more than 24 people are already being held under possible visa violations, the Justice Department says. Sources say many will not have any information, but others may be helpful or even guilty. Even the Attorney General acknowledges investigators are certainly working under the assumption that more attacks were planned, and there are still terrorists in this country willing and wanting to conduct more attacks. Aaron?
Eileen, a couple of things. You and your team have been dealing with these sources on all manner of stories over the years. When you deal with them now, do you get the sense from them that this is different than anything else they've ever done?
Yes, it is. I mean, one of them I talked to today said to me, I'm just having to relearn this all over again. And that's what's so intriguing. A lot of things that they thought they'd solved are just coming back. And so things that they had laid to rest as potentially, you know, that they had finished it off, they're finding they're having to reopen it. And that's, of course, then also causing a lot of second guessing, a lot of guilty feelings, I think, on a lot of investigators' part. Also, the breadth of this is really amazing to everybody. And, Aaron, it's really confusing. These guys are using all very similar names.
I feel better knowing I'm not the only one who's confused in all of this as I go through the list of names. If they are, that works for me. One other thing, is this pretty much old-fashioned police work? Do you get any sense that they've turned a lot of informants other than the people who are cooperating? Can you give us any kind of detail on the methods that are being used?
It's good old-fashioned gumshoe police work. In Florida, you saw it today. In a fairly affluent neighborhood, neighbors were shocked to see that the FBI coming back for the second time in a week. Now, why? Retracing the steps of some hijackers. This time, they were bringing in forensic teams to scour an apartment there. As it turns out, and we knew this through checking computer documents, 3 of the hijackers lived in this apartment, according to those computer records. Law enforcement sources found that out, checking the same sources. The FBI is searching these places. They're gathering evidence like credit card receipts, bank records, travel documents. They're trying to piece all these things together to see who else might be associated with these men and how else they might be associated with others around the world, also including Osama bin Laden. There's a dual purpose. They've got to prove the case against bin Laden, but more importantly, they've got to find these accomplices, these associates, to thwart any other plots against other U.S. targets. Aaron?
Eileen, thanks. Eileen O'Connor, among the group of CNN correspondents and producers who are working all around the clock on the investigative side of this. Not far away at the Pentagon, the death toll remains at 188. It's not likely to change very much. Unlike the World Trade Center location, the Pentagon location seems a bit more secure in terms of the missing and the dead. That 188 number includes the people who are on the plane that hit the building, and it also includes the hijackers. And if you want to see that, then perhaps we should put a different number there. Some to think about. In any case, the crews at the Pentagon continue to work around the clock, digging through the mess and looking for more bodies. We learned today, by the way, it's among the most unsettling parts of what went on Tuesday morning, that President Bush did in fact give an okay to shoot down any unauthorized commercial jet that seemed to be approaching the White House or the Capitol. CNN military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre has been working on that part of the story and other matters coming out of the Pentagon today. Jamie?
Pentagon sources tell CNN it was only after the third hijacked plane slammed into the Pentagon that President Bush gave the agonizing order to shoot down United Airlines Flight 93 with 45 people on board if it got close enough to threaten Washington.
I gave our military the orders necessary to protect Americans, do whatever it would take to protect Americans, and of course that's difficult.
The President made the decision on my recommendation as well, wholeheartedly concurred in the decision he made, that if the plane would not divert, if they wouldn't pay any attention to instructions to move away from the city, as a last resort, our pilots were authorized to take them out.
The Boeing 757 crashed in Pennsylvania, apparently brought down when passengers tried to overpower the hijackers before the grim orders had to be carried out. Soon the whole country would become a no-fly zone enforced by U.S. military fighters. In response to the unprecedented hijackings, the FAA ordered all flights to land. And this replay of FAA radar data shows the amazing clearing of the skies as 4,500 blue dots disappear. In retrospect, Pentagon officials say there was almost no time to react. It wasn't until United Airlines Flight 172 struck the second tower of the World Trade Center at 9:02 a.m. that it was clear the United States was under terrorist attack. Because of its peacetime posture, the U.S. military was simply not in position to respond.
Anyone who has looked around the skies over the past several years knows that we do not keep aircraft in the air to anticipate some local situation like that.
According to a timeline provided by Pentagon officials, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, was notified at 9:25 a.m. that a third plane was hijacked and heading toward Washington. 10 minutes later, at 9:35 a.m., 3 F-16s screamed at supersonic speeds to Washington from Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, covering the 130 miles in 14 minutes. But the Pentagon was hit just 3 minutes later at 9:38 a.m., and by the time this F-16 showed up at 9:49 a.m., the fighters could only circle and look for other hostile planes. But even if the fighter jets had arrived on time, downing a jetliner over the congested urban area that surrounds the Defense Department might well have resulted in higher casualties than the 124 people killed in the fortress-like Pentagon. Military pilots patrolling the Washington-New York air corridor do not have carte blanche to shoot down any suspect plane. That still has to be approved by the president on a case-by-case basis. But if an airliner is hijacked and it's headed for a densely populated area, the White House is ready to sacrifice the civilians on board to potentially save more lives on the ground. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
Jamie, I lost your audio for a second, so I didn't hear the end of it, but let me throw out one quick question, and hopefully I'll be able to hear the answer along with our viewers. Had there ever been a case, to your knowledge, where it was even came close? No? I'm sorry. On we go. We got a problem. Looking ahead now, Congress is, we'll get back to work tomorrow. They got a lot of work to do. And first on the agenda, as you can imagine, is taking up a series of bills to deal with anti-terrorism. First of all, there are many lawmakers who want to ease the restrictions on law enforcement to allow law enforcement officials to track down those responsible. For example, make it a little easier to tap phone lines would be one. Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Bob Graham also plans to introduce a bill this week creating an Office of Counterterrorism. That office would direct both the CIA's and the FBI's efforts to fight terrorism. Lawmakers are also looking at efforts to stimulate the economy. I don't think anyone really has a good handle on, beyond the airline industry, how badly the economy is going to be hit by all of this. The airlines are one issue. Insurance companies are going to be hit badly. Possibility of new round of tax cuts as well. As we indicated, Congress is going to have to make some very difficult decisions, as always is the case when you have to balance national security, our collective safety, the safety of all citizens here, and individual freedoms. Senator Bob Graham, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Intelligence, will be one of the key players in crafting those laws. And Senator Graham joins us tonight. It's nice to talk to you, sir.
Good. Thank you.
Been an awful week for you, hasn't it?
It's been a week either to remember or a week to forget.
Yeah, it's hard to know sometimes. I think forget would work for me. I want to get into some specific things, but just in a general way. Do you expect that on the floor of the Senate and the House in the weeks to come, there will be this kind of fierce political debate about trying to find the right balance between national safety and individual freedom?
There will be a debate. I'm not certain how fierce it is because there is such a strong momentum in the country to protect ourselves against this new, very different threat for Americans. What we've got to do is find the balance that will increase our security, our ability to know and intercept terrorists, while at the same time not ourselves becoming like the terrorists. We don't want to lose our individual rights, our freedoms, what makes us Americans. I think we can find that balance, but we're going to have to be careful.
It's a lot harder to find that balance in a kind of unbalanced time that we live in, where we, just a few blocks behind me there, that center, that area keeps smoldering. I mean, there is a very intense feeling in Washington. And that I don't say it is dangerous, it can be dangerous.
Yes, there is a sense of anxiety. It's not just in Washington. I'm talking from Orlando, Florida tonight. It's here, it's all over the country. Some of the things that we're going to be doing are just common sense. For instance, our wiretap laws are based on the way telephones were used 20 or 30 years ago. They don't take account of some of the modern technologies. As an example, it's not unusual today for a person to use a half dozen different telephones, cell phones, phones at the office, phones at home. Yet our wiretap law makes it difficult to be able to get access to all of those phones at one time, so that whatever phone the person you're trying to surveil is using, you are listening to what they're saying. There are some other provisions which are executive and do not involve changes in the law as such. As an example, the CIA has had a policy since the mid-1990s that it will not employ a person, a foreign national, to do work with our intelligence agencies if they have a bad background.
Is that a bad idea?
Well, it's not a practical idea in this sense. If you're trying to hire somebody who you hope will be able to get close to bin Laden or another terrorist so that we can find out what's on their mind, what they're likely to do, you're not going to go to the local monastery to find those people. You're going to be looking for persons who've had some prior association and therefore have some basis of confidence and affinity so that they can get inside the terrorist cell and get the information that you need. And
I'm sorry, it's bad guys that lead you to bad guys.
Yeah, you're going to have to get people who've got some dirt under their fingernails and probably some bad reports in their background.
How about I think it was in 1976 that President Ford signed the executive order banning assassination. I'm not sure the year. I think it was about right, though. Should American agents or the people that are hired by American agents be allowed, as the Israelis do, to go in and assassinate people they don't like, don't want?
Yeah, the answer is yes, but it's not as if they're going to have open season. Prior to President Ford signing that order, the president, on a case-by-case basis, made a determination as to whether a representative of the United States would be authorized to use lethal force against a third party, a non-U.S. citizen. What President Ford did is really put handcuffs on his own administration, and subsequent presidents have accepted those handcuffs. I believe now is the time to take those handcuffs off and let President Bush make a judgment on a case-by-case basis as to whether it's in the national interest to use lethal force to remove someone who might be organizing a terrorist assault against citizens of the United States.
There's a kind of uncomfortable irony here, isn't there, Senator, that in just the last few weeks before the tragedy of Tuesday, a good many American officials were very critical of the Israelis for doing exactly what you're now saying the U.S. government should be allowed to do.
Well, I was not one of those Americans who was so critical.
I'm not suggesting that.
Because the reality is, if you're dealing with a terrorist, the only effective defense you have is good intelligence that leads you to who they are, where they are, what they're planning to do, and then the capability to apply that good intelligence in order to take them out before they can commit another September 11th. And if that means that you have to take them out through an assassination method, I think as painful as that is, if the choice is that or the rubble of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, I would have to opt for the assassination.
Senator Graham, you have a fascinating and difficult balancing act in the days ahead. We appreciate your time. We hope, and as this process unwinds, we'll have a chance to talk again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I look forward to that, and I particularly look forward to talking about why it's going to be so important to put somebody in charge of our national anti-terrorism programs, because I'm afraid we're going to find that one of the reasons that Tuesday was as tragic as it was is because we didn't have our governmental agencies as coordinated as they should have been.
We'll talk more about that first question next time we talk.
Good. Thank
you, sir. Senator Bob Graham joining us from Orlando, Florida tonight, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The Bush administration was out in full force today. It was Sunday. The talk shows were full of administration officials making their case, trying to gain support for the president's position. CNN's Kelly Wallace from the White House tonight. More on that.
After huddling with his national security team at Camp David, President Bush returned to the White House with the First Lady and urged Americans to try to get on with their lives.
Tomorrow, the good people of America go back to their shops, their fields, American factories, and go back to work. Our nation was horrified, but it's not going to be terrorized.
Mr. Bush in a 15-minute session with reporters showing so many different faces. Disbelief that suicide bombers could pummel into buildings filled with innocent people. Anger when asked about suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden's claim he was not involved. And resolve to win the war.
They have roused a mighty giant. And make no mistake about it, we're determined.
The president's words, part of a full-court administration offensive to reassure a jittery public.
We're pursuing over 40,000 leads.
They can't destroy America. Things have changed since last Tuesday. The world's shifted in some respects.
The administration facing a delicate balancing act, encouraging an anxious country to go back to work while making the case its campaign against terrorists and those who harbor them will not be an overnight solution.
It will take time. It's not a matter of days or weeks. It's years. It's going to take the support of the American people, and I have every confidence it'll be there.
The support is there now. In a CNN USA Today Gallup poll, 86% said they back a military action even if it lasts several months. Support does drop, though, to 66% if a conflict lasts several years. For a public angry about how these tragedies could have happened, Attorney General John Ashcroft says he will send proposals to Capitol Hill in days to strengthen laws targeting terrorists.
We will develop the tools.
While Secretary of State Colin Powell calls for a return to normalcy.
If we stick in our bunkers and walk around afraid, they will have won. Well, we're not a fearful people. We know how to overcome tragedy.
And at this hour, a helicopter circling overhead the White House grounds. Just another reminder of the high security alert and the beefed up security around the White House. Now, earlier today, the White House releasing some photos we've never seen before of that day that really shook the world. President Bush talking aboard Air Force One to Vice President Cheney as he headed back to the White House from Nebraska. There, the president and at that photo, rather, Vice President Dick Cheney talking to President Bush in an underground operations center. Also today, we heard the Vice President talking about those moments Tuesday morning. He said he was in his office. His secretary called, told him that a plane had hit one of the towers of the World Trade Center. He turned on his television, and then he watched as a second plane hit that second tower. The Vice President saying right then it triggered the thought that this was terrorism. And then, Aaron, as the Vice President is getting in touch with the President, who happened to be in Florida, and monitoring developments, his Secret Service agents came into his office. He described it this way to NBC's Meet the Press. He said, they came in and said, "Sir, we have to leave immediately." And they grabbed me, and Tim Russert said, they literally grabbed you and moved you. The Vice President said, yes, and your feet touch the floor periodically. They're bigger than I am, and they hoisted me up and moved me very rapidly down the hallway and eventually to an underground operations center. Aaron, that's what the reason for this. The Secret Service receiving a report that a plane was headed to the White House. We do know that plane eventually hit the Pentagon. Aaron?
Couple quick things. President back at the White House tonight, or is he still at Camp David? Do we know?
Yes, we do. The president is back here at the White House, came back this afternoon, expected tomorrow to meet with his national security team, and also, Aaron, to meet with his economic advisors. A big focus will be watching the markets, which open tomorrow, and to see how the markets react.
Is there one issue, in a sense, going on that's being dealt with there? Do you have any sense at all that anybody is dealing with any of the other issues the administration had on the table less than a week ago?
At this point, the focus of this White House, the president said so today, is this worldwide fight against terrorism. He said he is focused on it. He is devoting every resource of the entire administration to this. You know, Aaron, just a week ago, the big fight in Washington was over the budget. There just wasn't enough money to pay for all the priorities. The big debate between Democrats and Republicans would be who would go ahead and dip into the Social Security surplus. The vice president today saying that debate is pretty much a moot point right now. Right now, the focus is on shoring up an international coalition, trying to find the terrorists and, of course, those who harbor them. Aaron.
All changed in a heartbeat, Kelly. Thank you. Kelly Wallace outside the White House tonight. As Kelly mentioned, all eyes on Wall Street, 9:30 tomorrow morning, including the president's. Among those who will stand on the podium to ring the opening bell, New York's Governor George Pataki will be there. A number of other politicians. Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill will be up there as well in ringing the opening bell on the New York Stock Exchange. A spokesperson said today, all testing is completed, everything is a go. But a lot can still go wrong. A huge part of the financial district, which is very, very close to the Trade Center, still unsafe. Thousands are lacking power and electricity. Even getting to the stock exchange won't be easy. No cars are allowed in the area, and the approach by subway or bus or ferry is a very complicated one, to say the least. And for those who do get there, it is surely going to be a painful day. 3,000 people work on the floor of the exchange. It's safe to assume that many of them know someone who died on Tuesday morning. We don't know if it is a sign of things to come, but the markets in Asia are open, and it's been a very difficult morning over in Asia already. CNN Financial News correspondent Lisa Baring joins us now from Hong Kong. This would be good morning to you, I guess.
It will be. Thanks, Aaron. Stock markets throughout Asia are sharply lower. Investors are increasingly worried about how Wall Street will act when trading resumes in New York in coming hours. Tokyo's Nikkei is back below the crucial 10,000 level, falling nearly 5%, now at 9,520. It is the lowest level since 1983, and the Nikkei is now below the level of the Dow. The Tokyo Stock Exchange has resumed normal hours after limiting trading last week, but trading in U.S. stocks remains halted in Tokyo. Hong Kong stocks opened for trading half an hour ago, now down to 3.8%. Other markets are also plunging. In Seoul, the Kospi is down 2.5%. In Taiwan, the Taiwan weighted index down 4.5%. The S&P ASX 200 down 4.32%. And in Singapore, the Straits Times index is now down more than 4%. The dollar in Asian trading is near 6-month lows against the Japanese yen, now at 117.05 yen. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you. Just go back a couple of days. In the aftermath of the disaster, the tragedy, how did the Asian markets respond?
On the first day of trading, a few of the markets, I think it was Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, were actually closed. The other markets remained open with some shorter hours and further restrictions on the levels that they could drop. But they were all down sharply lower. They all ended the week lower. The Nikkei fell below the 10,000 level for the first time in 17 years. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong ended the week 7% lower, also below the 10,000 level. So last week was also a bad week for Asian stocks. Aaron.
Lisa, thanks. Perhaps a sign of things to come, perhaps not. We'll start to get an answer to that about 9:30 tomorrow morning, and then as the day moves, it'll be interesting to watch the ups and downs on Wall Street. Lisa, thank you. Lisa Baring in Hong Kong this morning. Back here in New York, New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani has been criticized and praised for many things during his public career. I think it's fair to say just about nobody is neutral on Rudy, and it is always Rudy. Since Tuesday, he has been everywhere and done everything, and even many of his foes concede this has pretty much been the mayor's finest hour. For more on the mayor of New York, here's CNN's Candy Crowley.
Sunday, the mayor of New York put a smile on his face, a tux on his back, and escorted a Brooklyn bride down the aisle. He was making good on a promise he made several weeks ago to the mother of the bride, who told him she had lost a son, a husband, and a father within the last year.
I asked her how she can bear it, and she said because she feels the pain of it, she allows the pain to happen, but then she focuses on the good things that are left in life, like her daughter's wedding. And that's what you have to do, she said. You have to focus on the good things in life.
For a city that's endured 5 days of bottomless grief and endless agony, focus on a good thing seemed like the right thing. But then Rudy Giuliani's been doing a lot of things right.
He's such a strong man. I think he carries everybody with his strength.
There are rays for his honor in nearly every corner of this vast, aching city. They applaud as he walks by now, a salute for a guy who seems never to sleep and nearly always to know the answer.
Basically, what the medical examiner needs are toothbrush, hairbrush, items, personal items that would contain cells, hairs that you can use to do DNA analysis.
He's giving the public information as he gets it. He seems to be very thorough and on top of things.
Within hours of the Twin Tower attacks, Giuliani had twice addressed his city, shaken but steady, with a gut instinct for what needed saying.
He asked the people of New York City to do everything that they can to cooperate, not to be frightened, to go about their lives as normal. Everything is safe right now in the city.
He has really just been an inspiration of leadership and of stability and made us all remain calm and comfortable here.
Term limited, the mayor is in his final months. After 7.5 years, his exit has been, to now, singularly ungraceful. Captured fairly efficiently in a short exchange with the press last June over questions about a messy private life.
Don't be a jerk. Thank you. I said don't be a jerk.
Tenderness, caring, and empathy have not been hallmarks of his tenure until September 11th.
And people should know that they're not alone, that there are a lot of people suffering with them,
there to help them and support them.
He's comes across very, very caring and very sympathetic, and he's
very sincere.
And very sincere, and he's very certain.
He has been known as a mayor who made the city work with a tough, no-nonsense approach. Criticized as combative and uncompromising, this week he was praised for it.
One of the best things they can do to show how strong we are and how terrorists can't cower us is not to be coward.
For a city like New York, we need a tough mayor like him, no matter how you look at it.
Politically, Governor George Pataki and Mayor Giuliani have never cared much for each other, but they have bonded over their care for this city.
For our governor and our mayor for being with us at every step along the way.
You would not be surprised to know that on the street they're saying they wish Giuliani could run for mayor again now. And perhaps he will run for something again soon. But whatever happens, this much remains. In New York's worst hour, Rudy Giuliani gave his best. When his city was in danger of crumbling, Rudy was a rock. Candy Crowley, CNN, New York.
The mayor's command of the crisis has been seen by Americans all over the country, and we gather admired. Some New York, for many people, seemed to represent the worst of American life, an island filled with the selfish, the abrasive, the cutthroat. Americans have seen in these days another side of New Yorkers, a softer side, a more generous side, a kinder side. And we wondered the other day if that is changing people's impressions of this city. So we asked correspondent Jeff Flock, who has been out in the Midwest this week, to do some reporting on that. He's been in Wisconsin and Iowa and Nebraska, and Jeff joins us this evening from Kansas City, Missouri. Jeff, good evening.
Aaron, good evening to you. A place called Fitz's. It's a place where they bottle root beer and a restaurant, and they've let us stay past closing time tonight to gather some folks to think about this in some sense. You talking about New York, you folks out here in the Midwest haven't had a high opinion of New York in some ways over the years, have you?
Not exactly. I mean, New Yorkers seem more here and now, and we want it our way. Kind of fast paced,
This is not a place you wanted to live, is it, Nelsie?
No, I don't think so. Too many people and too small a place and too much mass transit and too much commuting,
Well, we were just saying how this city, New York, has been under the microscope for the past week or so. And what are your thoughts now?
Oh, I think we've seen what New York is really all about. And in fact, New Yorkers are just like the rest of us in America. They have pulled together, they are strong, and their compassion has been phenomenal.
Chris, you're a fire inspector. You obviously resonated with the New York firefighters and what they've given and all the rescue folks.
Absolutely. I have to take my hat off to the New York Fire Department for the way that they've banded together as firefighters do in a time of crisis. They're really pulling together to try to find as many survivors as they possibly can, and I'm just really impressed.
With what this city has done, does it surprise you, Sarah? I mean, you made the point earlier, well, I guess they're really just like us, aren't they?
They are just like us. They don't like for us to know that they're just like us because they tend to like to think that they're the king of kings and on top of the heap, but they're just like us. Their blood runs red just like our blood does, and they're all immigrants too, and I think that's another matter. We're all in this together, and they were able to put a face on each and every individual that's missing, and I thank the media for doing that because so many of the families had the pictures of their loved ones, and we're showing them, and we, sitting out here in America, out of the New York City area, were able to really feel exactly the pain of each and every family. So now New Yorkers a family.
Yeah, it's almost that it's turned into a small town in some ways, which you know what it's like to live in a small town, and you wouldn't have thought that'd be New York, would you?
No, not really. But, when you have a condensed area like that, and I think, with the firefighters, that, especially in the big metropolitan areas with so much history like New York, they're a family. They really band together, and they're going to fight to get through this no matter what it takes. And, the doctors and the nurses and the emergency technicians that have just shown up down on the streets down there, and the Red Cross and everybody, that just puts on, a face mask and a helmet and gets down there and helps.
Now, while we're here and before we get away, I do want to ask, since tomorrow stock market opens, and I just want to get a sense out here in the middle of real America what's going to happen tomorrow. You worried about what's going to happen tomorrow, Sean, as it kicks off?
Not myself, no. I mean, the market goes down and it goes up back and forth all the time, and tomorrow's a good buying day, I believe.
You do think so?
Definitely. I'll definitely buy stocks tomorrow.
You're going to buy tomorrow?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody else got their hand up on that one? Yeah, no kidding. Because somebody has said, everybody just ought to buy a stock or two, even if they don't have a whole lot of money, just to try and send a message.
Oh, I think so. I think the one true strength this country can show now is to keep this economy stable and show the folks who have done this to us that it didn't work.
Now, what happens if things go the other way, Chris?
Well, if things go the other way, we'll just have to hang on and hang on for the ride. When you're in the stock market, you're in for a penny, in for a pound. Much like Sean said, it goes down, it comes back up again.
And lastly, I got to ask this one question. Talking about New York. Is that a place you're going to go anytime soon?
No, I don't think they need visitors, but, they're going to recover. And, New York has everything. They've got Broadway, they've got national monuments, they've got, just so much. I mean, New York is always going to be New York. And, I'll visit sometime, but I think, stay out of their way for a while.
Yeah, is that common thought? Yeah, I appreciate that. Folks, thank you. Appreciate the time. Appreciate the folks at the restaurant letting us stay up late with them. Aaron, that's the latest from here as we listen to the Heartland. Back to you.
Jeff, thanks. Jeff Flock in Kansas City, Missouri today, in Barbecue Town. By the way, the Mayor Giuliani said today, if people around the country really want to show their support for New York, they ought to come here and spend some money. The city obviously is going to take an economic hit, and so the mayor, in characteristically blunt terms, said, come on here and unload some cash and help people out. Around the country today, the vigils continued. Here's an example. Not even the rain could stop. Minnesotans are pretty hardy, I know that. Could stop thousands from attending a rally dubbed Minnesota Remembers a Memorial from the Heartland. With their umbrellas and their American flags, Minnesotans prayed, listened to music and various speakers, including a native son, former Vice President Walter Mondale, and the current governor, Jesse Ventura. On to matters of diplomacy. The Pakistani government says it will deliver an ultimatum to the Taliban rulers of Afghanistan to hand over the suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden or face massive military action led by the United States. In New York today, the Afghan ambassador to the United States, who represents the anti-Taliban forces in Afghanistan, said the Northern Alliance, the opposition forces in Afghanistan, will make 15,000 troops available for any U.S.-led attack. And Ravan Fahardi joins us now. He said those words today, and he's here tonight to talk for a minute. Good evening, sir.
Thank you very much. First, tell me that I am ambassador to the United Nations.
Yes.
Not to the United States.
I'm sorry. I misspoke. Okay. I apologize.
Okay, yes.
When you hear what the Pakistanis have to say, you're not a big fan of the Pakistanis.
Yes, I think that this shows that there's a change in the foreign policy of Pakistan, because there was United States pressure. Let us remember that Pakistan created the Taliban in 1995.
So why should you or people in the United States believe the Pakistanis now when they say they will do whatever the United States asks in an effort to get Mr. bin Laden?
Yes, because what happened was so dramatic. This was a very important event of the beginning of century, of our century.
Do you think it shocked, we'll move off Pakistan in a minute, but do you think it shocked even the Pakistanis that this could have happened and has forced them to reevaluate their foreign policy?
Quite. This is what I. If really there is a change in their policy, and I hope there is, it is really that they have felt that this is necessary.
A couple of other areas to explore. How deep, how broad is the terrorist network in Afghanistan?
Well, the terrorist, it is centered, in the south, because the south is the territory which is Taliban held. Taliban are have occupied militarily this part of Afghanistan, and they protect bin Laden. Now also they came to the north in the past years, but we have been able to resist against them, and to have a part of Afghanistan, the northeast of Afghanistan, free, and also there are resistance in many places in the central mountains, and therefore Taliban, the rule, just maybe I think I can say safely that more than 20% of Afghanistan is free of the Taliban rule, while the press is putting it 10% of it, but it's more. Yes.
Very briefly, sir, is it in your mind somewhere that this tragedy might ultimately lead to the end of the Taliban regime?
This is what we hope. In any case, it would be quite inadequate if only bin Laden was surrenders, and it will not be finished, because there are thousands of Arab armies. Afghanistan is not an Arab country, but the thousands of the bin Laden army is in Afghanistan, is fighting us.
Dr. Pahardi, thanks for coming in tonight. The ambassador to the United Nations. I won't make that mistake again. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Since we're talking about Mr. bin Laden here, just about everybody from President Bush to the bellman at the hotel I've been staying at seems to believe that he is the mastermind behind this awful tragedy here. Today, the elusive Saudi exile denied it again. His statement read in part, quote, "After the recent attacks which the United States has witnessed, the U.S. government ventured to point fingers at me, accuse me of involvement. The U.S. government has consistently blamed me for being behind every occasion its enemies attack it. On every occasion its enemies attack it. I would like to assure the world that I did not plan the recent attacks, which seem to have been planned by people for personal reasons. As for me, I have been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following its leader's rules. The current leader does not allow me to exercise such operations." Bin Laden is certainly a complex figure with many enemies and many allies. As we have said, or as we're about to say actually, coming up in the hour ahead, we'll take a good look at the world's most wanted terrorist. Part of what my friend and colleague Jeff Greenfield will be doing. I'm going to get out of here a little early tonight and try and get some sleep, and you're going to help us out. Have you had a chance to, I want to talk about a couple of other things, but on the bin Laden stuff, what's your impressions here of the work we're going to put forward tonight?
Well, Peter Bergen, who is a CNN producer now, is an analyst on terrorism and counterterrorism, did this interview in 1997. At the time, if 1 in a million Americans had ever heard of him, I would have been surprised. And I think what Peter has brought to this is a unique insight, because he has traced the evolution of bin Laden's thinking over a long period of time, and how he got to the point of where he now thinks it's okay to target American civilians rather than American military personnel abroad. I've seen this interview. It's a fascinating interview, and when it's over, we will talk with Peter and let him shed a little more insight into where he thinks things stand now.
Let me turn your head to something else for a second. I was up flying around looking at the site this morning, didn't see it. What was your impression of the parade of guests on the Sunday talk shows today and where they were? Anything jump out at you?
You know, you put me on the spot, because what really jumped out at me was that I think there is still a sense of the mix of resolution and still astonishment that what happened. You know, I've been thinking of all the things we've been hearing year after year after year about where we are in the world and how we have to make sure that nobody misreads America. And I still think that some of the folks are still in a state, if not of shock, of absolute astonishment at what's happened. And the question I think a lot of people are asking is, clearly the country's united, clearly there's enormous resolve. The question now is, how sure are we that we know what it is we need to do? Yeah. And if we do that, will we be safe again?
Every time you give me that heavy sigh, I know I put you on the spot.
Well, you ask questions that I think can either be evaded or answered straight. So
thank you, Jeff. Jeff will be back with us in just a few moments. Amid the death and destruction in New York, some new lives are being celebrated today. Since Tuesday's deadly attack at the World Trade Center, dozens of babies have been born in New York City, as they are every day. And to many, that's a big reason for optimism in the Big Apple. Tonight, the story from CNN's Beth Nissen.
The outside walls of New York University Medical Center in Manhattan are papered with the names, descriptions, and photos of the missing. Many shown with their children, carrying them, feeding them, holding them in their first days in this world. Yet at the end of a week when thousands of lives ended, there is this small comfort, knowing that other lives have begun. Meet Nora Rose Draper, born September 15th, one of 56 babies born here since Tuesday morning.
I've just felt so good since she's been here for the first time since that day.
That day, the day the World Trade Center was attacked. The labor nurses here logged an unusually high number of births Tuesday.
22.
22 babies in 24 hours.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Nurses say high stress often triggers labor. It did for Lorraine Tobias. She watched the horror unfold on television all last week until Friday night.
Like it just hit me. But then that night I went into, my water broke and she came.
Came 3 weeks early.
I think she just decided that it was, people needed some good news.
Little Max Edelstein's safe arrival was good news for his parents, too. Yet they both admit they are apprehensive.
It was sort of overwhelming, the idea that there's so much death and destruction going on, and here we were bringing a new life into the world and what that world would be for this child.
Yeah, we even tried to call right away, to call our congresspeople to ask them, to push for justice rather than revenge. We want peace. We don't want more killing.
His name is Jaden Francisco Muniz, and I had him today at 8:06 a.m.
Tina Muniz is praying for peace especially hard. Little Jaden's father doesn't yet know his son has been born. Tina's husband is in the U.S. Navy, serving aboard a submarine that is somewhere in the world.
I have no way of getting in contact with him probably for a month and a half.
The past 6 days have been terribly hard for Tina. First the attack, now the talk of war.
Him being in the world now with this going on, it's you don't even want to think about it. Hopefully bringing this life into the world is making those around me more joyful.
All of these new parents and the labor-weary nurses are at heart optimistic.
It's hope. The children are our hope. And that's a new generation that we're bringing into the world. And they're our hope. Alex's mother thought we should call her Hope because when she was born.
They didn't name her Hope, although for her parents she does represent it.
She's being born into the world, but she's also coming into the world. She'll make it better.
I think it's still a good world. I just think we have to believe that.
Maybe we do. Beth Nissen, CNN, New York.
Kicking back.
Sleep well. For many across the country today, this weekend provided a chance to gather in churches and in synagogues. There were vigils all over the country. People came to parks. We saw people outside a fire station here the other night with candles, holding a vigil of their own. At Riverside Cathedral in New York today, actor Mandy Patinkin lent his voice to a special mass.
You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your deeds.
Just one of the many services going on today. We want to take a moment and bring you some of the other images of this weekend. Images of mourning and remembering and searching for peace.
Everything